Hello, and welcome to What the Tech from Boast AI, where we talk with some of the brilliant minds behind new and exciting tech initiatives to learn what it takes to tackle technological uncertainty and eventually change the world. I'm Paul Davenport, Boast resident tech journalist and head of content, and today I am thrilled to welcome Tony S. Kim onto the show. Tony is a corporate investor focused on AI infrastructure, deep tech, and enterprise SaaS, working to help founders tap into funding frameworks that fuel game-changing products and solutions. Tony is joining us on his own capacity today, and his opinions shared here are his own, but I cannot wait to pick his brain on how to navigate all that 2025 has in store when it comes to building incredible, innovative businesses. So, without further ado, welcome to the show, Tony.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks for having me. Very excited.
Now, I am pumped to be here. As listeners will know, we're relaunching the show after going quiet for a few months, and you're one of our first guests to kick off season 2. Our mutual friend Sydney actually got you on my radar, so she came to me highly recommended. I can only highly recommend everybody who she throws in my court. So I'd love to jump right in. Tell me about yourself, Tony. Tell our audience what got you into the entrepreneurial space in the first place, and yeah, where you're at today.
Sure, happy to. Honored to be here and honored to be one of the first few guests for the show. But yeah, I had a pretty interesting career as I was starting. I got a lot of influence early on through my parents, where they been running a manufacturing stock sale business that's been international. And always growing up, I've had exposure early on through the business side through my parents. And that has always been embedded in me as I was kind of navigating through my career early on. So I started my career as an investment banker working at a French bank in New York City, where I mainly focused around the infrastructure as well as the telecom space in large. But throughout the process, I've always kind of noticed myself like studying the foundational technology that kind of underneath the infrastructure layer, as well as how the infrastructure layer is foundational to the technology layers on top. And also made a lot of like investments in the growth stage companies throughout the processes, which is also where I noticed that, hey, this is the space I want to get into. So eventually I made the transition to where I am today. I'm working at a Fortune 100 company. I'm on the corporate development as well as the venture arm here, where I've been engaged in all aspects of the processes from M&A to venture capital, as well as to LP investing as well.
That is awesome to hear. And I love that you have that varied background that I think is unique to people in the VC space too. And I want to dig into a little bit more about the CVC space and the nuances there. But to recap a few things too, I love hearing that your parents running their own business, being entrepreneurs in their own right. That's so cool. And honestly, I feel like that's a running theme for all the founders or just tech ecosystem partners that we have on this show. It's usually somebody who, whether it was a parent or a parent figure or something like that, showed them, hey, be scrappy and be entrepreneurial, and it's going to be fun, and you're going to really be proud of what you're doing in the long run. So I love that you mentioned that, just because, again, that seems to be one of the key ingredients for all the interesting conversations that we have on this show. And then again, how sure, you were working at that French bank in NYC, but you got really into the foundational technologies itself. So you have that lens to actually understand what is truly innovative tech and what is stuff that's going to actually move the needle and not just be kind of the rinsing and repeating, which I think we'll touch on later when we unpack some of the AI of it all and what's going on today. But I'd love to know right now, again, going back to that CVC question and that VC question, what's unique about the work you're doing today and how that has changed and evolved over the course of your career?
Of course. And I think that's also like a very interesting aspect as well, because there's the clear differentiation between CVCs and VCs. And whenever I engage with a lot of startup founders, actually, they're not as aware of the differences, but I think CVC, there's a lot of innovation happening. CVC has been there for a long period of time, but then we are continuing to see new companies developing the new CVC arms, and every CVC also functions a little bit differently in terms of the mandates that they have. So I think the clear differentiation that you could maybe say from a VC as well as CVC perspective is the VC is mostly purely financially driven, and then you often cases kind of have a fund structure, and there's a return structure based on the LP basis that you have. But when it comes to CVC, often cases, it's fairly unique. Some of the CVCs have their own fund structure, but their LP base is majority based on the company that they operate under. Or a lot of the CVCs, in my case, is also where the companies leverage the balance sheets to make the investments. So when it comes to the mandate behind investing behind the balance sheets is then often cases every investment has to be a little bit more strategically aligned. So in terms of instead of financial returns, there's also often cases where CVCs are seeking like a strategic goals. It could be forming a closer partnership, or it could be forming a closer go-to-market channel relationship, etc. So the mandates from a CVC perspective is often a little broader or also differentiated. So I think it's often cases very crucial for founders as they are navigating with communicating with the VCs or CVCs to kind of have the differentiation in mind. And also the chain of approval is also fairly different from that regard as well. Typically, if from a pure VC perspective, often cases, once the investment memo is presented, it's approved by maybe the partners. It would be going through a joint decision-making processes after extensive diligence. Um, Typically for a CVC, again, this varies by structure, but often cases for a CVC that's more strategic driven, often cases a lot of approval also involves the business unit as well, which means someone from the business has to be able to champion the deal before it goes through. So that's also where more extensive diligence process could be involved. So that's also, I think, something that that's very, different from a pure CVC structure as well as a VC structure.
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth. I was going to put a bow on that with the more extensive diligence of it all, just because, again, it has to be a little more strategic. The mandates aren't one-to-one when you go from one CVC to the other. And actually, even pulling on that too, I know I mentioned in the intro that a lot of your focus right now is on AI infrastructure and is on deep tech and is on SaaS. And again, working with
Correct.
companies strategically to drive those investments for the opportunities that come born out of that different structural mandate that's happening in a CVC, specifically the one that you're working with. So to pull on that thread a little bit, I'd like to start
Hmm.
talking about AI and just talking about AI mandates. I think we're hearing
Hmm.
it everywhere too. I think a big thing that I need to allude to actually is that even just the funding systems up in Canada and in the US, they're being modified to kind of accommodate the introduction of AI mandates in the broadest sense today. So I'm
Sure.
thinking about the CDAE up in Quebec, where they're adding on IA, the French version, it's AI. And
Yep.
it's basically changing that e-business tax credit that used to really favor traditional software and SaaS development for the more expansive use cases. So similarly with Shred, they're kind of changing up the thresholds and the different kind of stacking strategies that you can do based on the new technologies that are coming to market and that people are taking advantage of. It's basically everyone's doing business differently, so everyone's doing R&D differently. And so it's impacting how the companies we work with claim their government funding, for instance, but it's also impacting, again, how businesses are being evaluated from that VC perspective and that CVC perspective. So I'd love if you could kind of unpack for me, like what patterns are you seeing in AI investment strategies or how teams are responding to AI mandates, and whether that's across different sectors in 2025 or whether there actually aren't a lot of meaningful applications today. I'd
Hmm.
love to hear your take on it all.
Sure. Wow. It's a very a loaded question there. So I'll try to unpack it, piece by piece over here. So certainly there has been a lot of innovation brought forward through AI. In many ways, we are seeing the barriers got further lowered in terms of innovation when it comes to launching an application or launching a startup. We are seeing also companies where they're starting by reaching astronomical like ARR in a span of maybe typically would take a company 3 to 5 years by reaching it in like a 12 months. And we have companies like Lovable or 11 Labs, etc. That's like, performing like exceedingly well, focusing on like the AI agent side. So certainly there's a lot of innovation that's happening with AI in presence. And from an investing perspective, it also becomes a lot more interesting as well. We are seeing a lot of companies that's AR native have been fetching a lot higher valuation, and it's been also increasingly competitive for a lot of VCs to participate in a round as well, or anticipate being in a round in general. So natural that has kind of fundamentally raised the valuation up. And that's also fundamentally because how tangible that we have been feeling that AI kind of has been changing our day-to-day life, whether that's how ChatGPT, has embedded into our life. And from a developer perspective, pretty much a lot of kind of agent could, navigate how they code, as well as, going through the full like software lifecycle, like development processes. So um, certainly there's a lot of excitement on that front. And given the valuation that a lot of high AI, companies are fetching today, that's also where I feel in many aspects VCs start to broadening their mandates, not just looking at the US market, often cases becoming a little bit more competitive, but also looking at other markets as well, in Canada, in Europe, etc. And the fundamental innovation happening in AI is not just a national thing, but I think it's a global thing, and it's affecting the national interest of every country in every single way. As in many aspects, it's also politically becoming like an arms race as well, right? Whoever could get there means they could, obtain a lot of power as well as influences. So certainly we are seeing a lot of that shaking out. Was also a lot of government mandate backing innovation in the AI space, which I think will continue on. We are still very early. From my perspective, especially in the AI agent side, we are still in the very early innings. I foresee that we will continue to have a lot of investment flowing into these hot AI companies moving on. And also, but I think one thing that would be very interesting to see is that given AI, it's also not an excuse anymore to kind of have a low traction because often cases, a lot of these AI companies, as much as they're fetching a high valuation, also have really a strong growth rate from an AIR perspective as they uh, navigate through this landscape. So, which is also something I've been seeing as I've been judge as well as mentor across different like accelerator programs. I've been seeing a lot of companies applying, even though their pre-seed and seed stages are already having tractions that I don't normally typically see a couple years ago. So it's been interesting to see, traction matters a lot more now just to stand out against some of the other like native AI companies. And at the same time, when it comes to like fundraising perspective as well, we're also seeing that a lot of different funds are trying to be more innovative to get closer to the ecosystem so that they could tap into a lot of the talents. So we've been seeing like Menlo Ventures as such is raising a new fund called Anthropology. So that would be partnering up with Anthropics. And we are also seeing a lot of other funds like launching an exclusive AI fund like A6 and Z is currently raising their like new AI fund, etc., which I will continue to see that happening as well.
That's an interesting. I don't know if it's necessarily a shift in the paradigm, but it's an interesting thing to note that it's the VCs who are kind of changing their approach to get that talent, to get the hot interested parties onto their team. Whereas I think during different cycles, I don't want to call it a bubble because I think we're
Yep.
on to something very different here with the AI race, so to speak.
Hmm.
It was a little bit of a different paradigm. It was more like companies were like, well, I want name your VC here. This is the one that has the most high success rate. This is the one where all the unicorns come out of. I'm going to develop a business to that. Now they want to try to attract a talent that's already out there and finding that traction, like you said, a lot faster than it has ever happened in the past. And a lot of that is from the capabilities that AI can unpack, but also just because it's hot and it's been hot for
Yeah.
a while too. I just think something switched. I mean, of course, we've named all the agentic ones. I mean, I'm a big fan of Anthropic.
Mhm.
Content marketer, it's made my life a lot easier. Still very wary about some bits and pieces of it, but it's won me over. I mean, I'm a lot more trustful of AI today because I've seen a lot more practical applications in the
Mhm.
recent past. And so I think that makes a ton of sense that now VCs, CVCs, we're getting strategic, we're changing up the mandate, we're broadening it a bit, we're going to get that talent onto our team. So yeah, again, not maybe a traditional paradigm shift, but definitely something that I think has been a change compared to at least even 5, 10 years ago. So that's super interesting to note. Another thing I wanted to raise too is like, you're talking about traction. I hear a lot about pilot purgatory and also just kind of the hype wave. Like, again, don't want to characterize this as a bubble, but how do you evaluate whether an AI initiative represents a genuine innovation versus something that's just riding the hype wave?
For
If you
sure.
think it's there, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's also a key crucial questions that I think everyone has been asking as well as they're diving into a lot of AI companies out there. So I think the fundamental design as well as the architectural structure matters a lot more. So I think the goal here is that you are diving into these companies to understand they're not just a wrapper in some ways, right? So they're not just an OpenAI wrapper. They're not just like a Anthropic wrapper in some ways, but every design pieces becomes a lot more crucial, whether that's what kind of like AI memory architecture are you using, how are you fundamentally backing into your infrastructure, or whether that's what kind of GPUs that you're using, et cetera, to that detailed extent. And often cases from these questions, then you could fundamentally also really understand whether how a founder is like thinking about their company in the longer run. Because if it's a wrapper, then often cases they wouldn't really think thoroughly through their AI infrastructure in specific. I think that's also where it comes a lot more crucial. Because typical companies, their AI wrappers, they would just rely on a single APIs, but often cases, the companies they want to differentiate itself from others wouldn't just rely on a single API, but they would try to customize their infrastructure provisioning by maybe changing the storage architecture, the network architecture, or to the extent what kind of like AI accelerators that they are using, whether that's GPU or if they're more inference focused, then there's a lot of also products that's kind of innovating in the market. So I think that's like definitely one. And beyond the overall architecture on the technical side, I think fundamentally there's also a lot focus in terms of maybe that's the team, the background of the founders, and the reason behind why they are founding a specific product. Um, what problems are they solving? How big is the market? As much as these kind of fundamental questions could be simple, but often cases, I think it's also very important also to just to double check today because there's so many AI companies out there. And as much as the innovation is happening very rapidly, after I think it's still very important fundamentally. It's about the team that's leading the product versus the product that's leading the team.
I love that ethos. Okay, I'm gonna pull back on a few things you mentioned because they spoke to me, and I think also really spoke to Boast. First, going back to like the wrappers and understanding like, is this
Mm.
an actual unique solution? So first off, to bring it back to like R&D tax credits and just innovation funding,
Yep,
if you want to get that free non-dilutive funding for the government, you need to be doing something net new. You can't just be putting a
100%.
wrap around a box. That is the fundamental criteria, no matter where in the world you're doing business.
Hmm.
And we have seen firsthand just in the past 6 months, so many R&D tax credit providers or shred providers come out of the woodwork that are pure play agents. They're wrappers. They're not unique anything on the back end on the infrastructure. Yeah, they're probably combining automations to get some of the integrations with different programs, but you're getting what you pay for with a lot of those off the shelf solutions that again, it's more just about we developed this really quickly because there is an open source tool out here that we could brand, we can put some labeling on, we can tell you we got the expertise because we got all the coding right in there. But fundamentally, again, those aren't best of breed solutions. I think specifically in our space, to step away from the AI of it all, too, you absolutely need somebody with that expertise and you need a human on your team. And I think that goes back to what you were saying, too, about the team being involved in who's
100%.
developing all of this and making sure that there's a lot of integrity and there's a lot of passion there. Like, again, gotta toot our own horns here at Boast, but everyone here has a lot of integrity. Everyone here is a technologist. A lot of our folks who are actually creating the claims for folks, they're founders in their own rights, and they've done this before,
Hmm.
and that's why they know how to speak the language of innovation that's gonna pass that IRS threshold or that CRA threshold. Whereas if you're just using an AI that makes it DIY and throws all the bells and whistles at you, you're probably going to get audited. You're going to get what you paid for. Exactly. But really just want to pull back on that point selfishly, just because it really spoke to what I feel like is a
Yep.
huge competitive differentiator for us here at Boast. But
Hmm.
also, again, the threshold of the companies we want to work with. We want to work with teams who have that integrity and who are building something that new and driving, again, that technological uncertainty, exploring new realms, truly unique innovation. So, I'm very, very happy that you pulled out that point. Now, not sure how specific you can get, but are there any other specific or any other projects that have been maybe highlights over the past few months when you've been exploring just what's out there in terms of AI or just in general, any other exciting businesses or initiatives that you think
Sure.
deserve a shout out? Yeah,
Sure. I think like any other like CVCs as well as the VCs out there, AI has just been front and center. I would say, and I would say because of also AI, we are seeing a lot of larger corporates are actually starting their CVC arm with a focus on AI. So the AI itself has been certainly been the driving force also behind innovation happening across other large corporates because now everyone thinking, okay, we have to catch up. Because I think in many aspects, it's either you adopt AI or you fall behind, in large, when it comes to innovation. So we are seeing a lot of that kind of playing out in large. Um, Broadly across the focus area for us, as far as we are looking at the whole AI stack bottom up. So we are looking at AI innovation all the way from the fundamental hardware layer, whether that's semiconductor, optics and optical, all the way up to whether that's storage, networking solutions, to the extent like LLM layers as well as the application layer in general. And I can certainly say that from the conversation I had with all my CVC peers that the full stack has really just been a focus across everyone. And I think what's also interesting behind the innovation across LLM is that there's also been a fundamental focus now to the hardware layer that's kind of backing it. With NVIDIA being one of the largest companies today, where the stock has been doing extremely well over the last couple of years because of the AI innovation, we are going to continue to see that there's going to be a lot of like focus. We're going to see a lot of kind of focus being around like the infrastructure layer, the data center layer, as well as the semiconductor layer, because there's still a lot of opportunities for grab beyond AI training. Given now that fundamentally we are slowly seeing like a shift into the AI inference side.
for sure.
Um, on the other regards, we would also continue to see more fundings going into other AI inference solutions that's innovating in the market. We've seen alternatives, NVIDIA alternatives out there like, Grok, Samba Nova, the Matrix, just to name a few, that's all raising at a pretty high valuation, but offering solutions that's architecturally different, targeted across different customer bases. So we'll continue to see the innovation, but also I think what will be interesting, we'll also continue to see more innovation on the AI memory layer as well, because in often cases today on the hardware side, which is very fundamental to the LLM as well as the software layer above, is that demand is far higher than supply. So we will continue to see many companies are tackling, or the focus would be tackling the supply restraint as well as constraint that we have across the market, whether that's from an energy perspective, to the extent the memory architecture, as well as the bandwidths that's associated with the hardware itself.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. Again, I'm just going to call back to some of the points that you were making too earlier. It's not even just about the AI training. It's really about the infrastructure because, to your point, demand is so huge right now,
Mhm.
and we don't have enough of any of it. It goes back to even your point about companies developing their own CVCs today because they need to play catch up. It also ties back
100%.
to the traction comment you made earlier and about the rapid ARR of a lot of these solutions. So the CVC will actually give a company an avenue to play that catch up quickly without losing steam, and also again with tapping into the ecosystem that's all around and that's
Mhm.
actually being developed really quickly. And again, I want to just emphasize to just the infrastructure. Like you need to be developing something that's architecturally different, A, to actually stand out in the market,
100%.
and also that's like targeting different markets. Like there's no single use case. And again, there's going to be different like form factors depending on like the memory you need or the GPUs and everything that's going to come out for your specific AI solutions.
Mhm.
When people broaden their understanding that it's not just the agentic stuff, it's not just the stuff that you're training day to day. So again, architecturally different. getting into all of those layers, the memory layer, the bandwidth, the energy layer of it all too. I think that's a big point also that needs to bear some repeating, that there's so many considerations in all of this race too. So there's going to be solutions that are born out to just even support the infrastructure elements beyond the infrastructure itself. So love hearing all of that. Love that this is what you guys are focused on. It's an exciting time to be in there too, knowing that, again, just seeing what happens when you blink and then you look up and watch the news. There's so much happening in the AI space. So it's an exciting moment to be there. But I'd love to know, what do you see for the future? What's next for either you and your team, or what, if you could have your crystal ball, do you think we'd be talking about in 6 months as it relates to AI infrastructure?
Wow. Yeah, it's kind of interesting in many aspects because given my background when I was working at a French bank and as I was kind of covering the infrastructure as well as telecom space, at the point I was already started seeing some innovation happening across like data centers. We've been doing a lot of project financing in greenfield, both greenfield as well as brownfield data centers. That's often cases kind of backed by hyperscalers, but that innovation has been further accelerating. And over the next 6 months, we will continue to see these hyperscalers investing a lot of capex into launching new data centers that could further support their capacity in both like AI training as well as AI inferences. And from that regards, I think it's also fairly interesting in that many hyperscaler companies, they're developing their own chiplets as well. So we are seeing hyperscaler companies are not trying to just grab one market by go, but they want to take the full stack end to end if they could, because it's just so much opportunity. Um, and there's so much also opportunity that could be created as a result of kind of owning a specific foundational layers. So everyone is doing whatever they could to be active across the whole stack end to end, from hardware all the way to like software layer. The AI agent side, we are still at the very early innings. Innovation is just starting. You know, led by you have the core LLM players out there, whether it's OpenAI, Anthropic, just to name a couple. We are still at the early innings, but we will continue to see this innovation accelerates over the next 6 months. Whether the AI agent would be coming further, in terms of like comprehensive as well as being able to tackle multiple aspects of the work is still like a moot point. But certainly we'll continue to see like innovations happening in the AI agent space, which there will continue to be a lot of investment happening across the spaces. And broadly across the board, I think over the next 6 months, there would continue to be a lot of funding happening across the full stack from AI hardware all the way to AI infrastructure as well as LLM. But I think a lot of the excitements would be kind of focused around how the AI agent innovation would change the landscape.
Mm.
And there's a fundamental question in terms of figuring out how efficient the AI agent could be. So I think the benchmark data would be pretty critical to see if is it fundamentally actually changing the way we work, or could it potentially replace like human labors? I think these would be really fundamental questions. And how better could it get? Because in often cases there's a lot of kind of question going into, hey, maybe OpenAI could be good enough, ChatGPT could be good enough to a certain extent. It would be a perfect AI assistant for you. It could book a trip for you. It could book a hotel for you just by a single comment. And the crazy thing is that I don't think we are far from there. I think we are getting there. It could potentially solve all the fundamental problems for you. And the application is not just like a day-to-day life, right? It could have huge impact on healthcare.
Yeah.
And also we could see it affecting regulated industry. But broadly across, I think also there could be a lot of interesting innovations kind of shaking out globally as well, because we are seeing a lot of macro events playing out. In the US, there's a lot of doubling down into AI projects in large. The hyperscalers are kind of promising they would invest more than 500 billions or more into the AI infrastructure space over the next couple of years. And you're also kind of seeing there's like AI innovation kind of happening in China as well. They're playing catch ups, and it's especially interesting because you have a lot of closed source model in the US developed by these kind of fundamental players, but you're also kind of seeing a lot of open source innovation happening in China. So
Yeah.
I think in the next 6 months also will be very kind of interesting to see what's happening kind of, you know, from a macro perspective.
Yep.
But all in all said, I think it's a very exciting time that we are living with kind of how AI has been kind of shaping the way we work, the way we live.
Yep. No, it's so funny. When you were using that example about like booking a trip, yes, I was like the way that it's already listening to me and the way it can already intuit like what I would want. It's crazy how fast these things have been moving. But to recap some of the points that you made there too, the investments are going to be happening across the full stack. And I think that's going to be happening globally. I think it's going to be happening in every corner. I think as much as we might talk about, I'm thinking about this show when we were recording interviews 6 months
Mhm.
ago, how AI was at every conference that we saw. It was the banner. It took over from SaaS. It took over as the new buzzword. It's so beyond buzzword at this point, and it's so
Mhm.
actually, I don't want to say arms race, but again, globally, everybody, that's where the opportunity is. You named it. That's where the billions of dollars of innovation from funding from those hyperscalers are going to be funneled towards. It's the game everybody wants to be in, and for good reason. Like the applications, we're seeing them expand. And yeah, again, I keep on looking backwards, but I'm like shocked when I look up to see how much that we've already applied AI to and the positive outcomes that we're getting out of it too. I think there's a lot of doom and gloom when we talk
Mhm.
about AI in a lot of conversations. I think a lot of it could be extremely positive for us. And I think it already is bearing out that way. I just think there's going to be growing pains, but
Yep.
again, people need to stake their claim. They need to get in at their level of the stack if they don't go full stack and just stake their piece of the pie. It's really cool. And I think we'll have a lot more to talk about in 6 months, Tony, once we see some of this stuff bear out.
100%, 100%. I think the innovation is only accelerating now. So it's either you embrace it or you fall behind in many aspects. So it's better to embrace it now, right?
Absolutely. And again, I think the infrastructure is what I'm really excited about, just because I think that's what needs to change, obviously. We need to accommodate for the future that AI can bear out with the infrastructure being in place full stack. But that's where I'm like really going to do some homework to just kind of see like what are the growth areas personally that I should start tracking today because it's beyond the algorithms themselves and it's beyond just those agents. Now we got to talk about how we're going to support this new reality and it's all happening. So it's great stuff.
Thanks again for having me on the show. And this is great, just to talk about like AI in general, as well as like the CVC structure. I think in many aspects, there's a lot of changes happening, and we will continue to see more innovations happening across the industry, which is also very exciting. Very, very, very exciting. And I think one thing that I just want to leave it to the founders today is that because because of AI, if you're AI native company, maybe it made fundraising slightly easier. But it could also be in many regards, for other traditional SaaS companies that it could be pretty downing for them as they have to pivot into like AI. I think one aspect is, um, I guess try to embrace changes in any ways possible. Don't be scared. And in many aspects, we would still value companies that has a strong thesis as well as a strong traction. Even regardless, the company's focuses entirely on AI. So, um, yeah, I think that's what I'll lead to the founders. Just continue to embrace the change as well as the innovation, and see how they could thrive in this market.
Embrace the change, embrace the innovation. That's how you're going to thrive. I love it, Tony. And I couldn't agree more. I think it goes back to too that you want to work with those people who have that ambition, have that dream, and are also willing to throw the baby out if they need to, and just make sure that there's a solution that is going to meet the needs of the market today. And that's going to push a lot of, I think, people in the software space probably go to the pure play AI or native AI arena. But again, we'll see how that bears out. I'd love to check in a few months to see what you've learned since we've chatted today. And yeah, this was fantastic, Tony. I can't thank you enough for joining me on here.
Awesome. Thanks, Paul. Appreciate the time.